Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie and I appreciate y'all stopping by. Today we're diving into the holiday spirit with these 20 new DIY vintage inspired Christmas ornaments. Get ready to deck the halls with these unique and budget-friendly creations that'll bring a touch of nostalgia to your holiday decor. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button. This is going to be a longer video than normal, so grab a snack and a warm drink and let's get started. For this first set of ornaments, I used 4 of these round wooden ornaments from this pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I started by removing the hangers from the top of all 4 ornaments and set them aside. Next, I applied an even layer of Mod Podge to the front of each of the ornaments and allowed them to dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. While the ornaments were drying, I printed off this set of round vintage Christmas images that I sized and shaped to fit the ornaments onto some regular printer paper and cut them out. And I will have a link to this free printable in the description box below for y'all. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I centered one of the images onto the front of one of the ornaments and placed a piece of parchment paper on top, and then used my Cricut Easy Press Mini to go over the image and reactivate the Mod Podge to adhere the image to the front of the ornament. Now, if you don't have one of these mini easy presses, you could easily use a regular clothing iron or just use Mod Podge to adhere the images to the ornaments. After I had the image on the ornament, I used some apple barrel paint in the color bright red and working in small sections painted around the outer edges of the image. While the paint was still wet, I used some of this ultra fine red glitter from Hobby Lobby and applied it to the edges of the ornament on top of the paint. I then continued to repeat this step until I had all the exposed areas of the front of the ornament covered with the glitter. I also went ahead and painted the back of the ornament with the bright red paint, minus the glitter. Next, I used Folk Art brushed metal paint in the color brushed silver to paint the front and back of the top cap with 2 coats. I then repeated these steps to decorate the fronts and backs of the other 3 ornaments. To seal the images and the glitter, I gave the ornaments 2 good coats of this Mod Podge Gloss Clear Acrylic Sealer and set them aside to completely dry. I used these silver metal hooks from the Dollar Tree as the hangers for this set of ornaments. I added 1 hook to the top of each ornament and used a pair of pliers to pinch them closed to keep them in place. Next, I took one of these silver chenille stems from the Dollar Tree and wrapped it around the bottom of the hanger and tied it into a small bow, then cut off the excess stem. I then took the red ribbon hanger that I removed from the ornament earlier and tied it in a simple shoestring bow. I used 2 of these tiny silver bells from this pack of bells that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby and placed 1 on each tail of the ribbon bow, securing them in place with a knot and cutting off the excess ribbon. Then, to finish up this ornament, I used a small dab of hot glue on the back of the ribbon bow and placed it in the center of the silver chenille bow, and this one is finished. I finished off the remaining 3 ornaments in the same way, and this ornament set is completely finished. I absolutely love how these turned out, but y'all will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. For this next set of ornaments, I used 3 of these wooden gift tags from this pack that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I started by removing the hangers and gave the front of each tag 1 good coat of Mod Podge and set it aside to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. While waiting on the Mod Podge to dry, I printed out these 3 vintage-inspired postcard tag images that I created onto some regular printer paper and cut them out. Again, I will leave a link to this free printable in the description box below. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I centered one of the images onto the front of one of the tags and placed a piece of parchment paper on top, then used my Cricut Easy Press Mini to go over the image and reactivate the Mod Podge to adhere it to the tag. After I had the image adhered to the tag, I took a finger sander and sanded off all of the paper that was hanging over the edges to give it a nice clean finished edge. Next, I took a tool with a sharp point and used it to reopen the hole in the top of the tag, making sure to go from the front to the back so that it had a clean finish. I then took some of these round hole reinforcement labels from Walmart and used apple barrel paint in the color Territorial Beige to paint them with 2 coats. After the paint was dry, I placed one of the hole reinforcement labels at the top of the tag, centering it over the hole. I then used the territorial beige paint to paint the tag that was exposed on the inside of the reinforcement label so that it would match. To finish up this ornament, I took this thin red ribbon from this multi-pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby and created a hanger by cutting a length of the ribbon, then feeding it through the hole on the top of the tag and back through itself, and then tied the two ends together on the top in a knot and cut off the excess ribbon. I then repeated these steps to create the other two tags using the images, and this set is finished. I think these turned out super cute, and I can't wait to add them to my vintage-inspired tree this year. For this next ornament, I traced out this retro teardrop ornament design onto some printer paper in the size that I wanted my ornaments to be and shaded in the back with a pencil to create a transfer. I then took a piece of this white foam ready board from the Dollar Tree and taped the image down onto the front. Next, I took a pen and traced the image to transfer it onto the foam board. After I had the ornament traced onto the foam, I used a utility knife with a fresh blade and very carefully cut it out, making sure to take my time working in small sections. Once I had the ornament cut out, I took a finger sander and sanded the edges of the ornament so that it had nice finished edges and it looked less like foam board. I then used apple barrel paint in the color Key West and gave the front, back, and sides of the ornaments 2 to 3 good coats. Next, I used folk art brushed metal paint in the color brushed silver to paint the cap of the ornament. After the paint was completely dry, I used some of this white puffy paint that I picked up at Walmart and, taking my time, filled in the design in the center of the ornament and set it aside to completely dry for 4 or 5 hours. Once the paint was dry, I took one of these small silver eye hooks and added a dab of hot glue to the threaded end and placed it in the top of the ornament. Next, I used some of this silver ribbon from Hobby Lobby to make a hanger. I fed it through the eye hook on the ornament and secured it with a knot, then tied another knot in the top of the ribbon and cut off the excess, and this one is done. I did go ahead and repeat these steps to create another ornament, this time painting it with folk art paint in the color Seashell Pink. I love the way these ornaments turned out. I feel like they really bring that retro feel to my tree decor, and best of all, they were extremely cheap and easy to make. For this next ornament, I used one of these beaded wreath ornaments from the Dollar Tree and started by removing all of the beads and the floral pick, leaving the wire ring to work with. I also used some of this silver tinsel from the Dollar Tree and wrapped it around the wire ring until I had it completely covered and was happy with the fullness. I did not have to use any glue for this step since the tinsel is wired and it secured itself while wrapping it around the ring. Next, I used 2 of the bigger bottle brush trees and one of the smaller bottle brush trees from this pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I used folk art paint in the color Lime Tree to paint the small tree. I then used apple barrel paint in the color Key West to paint one of the bigger trees. And finally, I used folk art paint in the color Seashell Pink to paint the second big tree. Once the paint on the trees was completely dry, I removed the wooden bases from each of the trees by twisting them off. Even without the bases, the trees were still a little too tall, so I went ahead and took some wire cutters and cut the stems off of all 3 trees. I placed some hot glue on the bottom of the pink tree and placed it in the center of the wreath off to the left side at the bottom. Next, I used hot glue to attach the blue tree to the wreath to the right side of the pink tree. Then I added some hot glue to the bottom of the green tree and placed it on the wreath right in front of the other 2 trees. Next, I used some of these 10mm wooden beads and some of these 8mm wooden beads, all from Amazon, and I will have these linked below. I divided out the beads and then used these metallic acrylic markers from Hobby Lobby to paint them. Once the beads were dry, I used dabs of hot glue on the back to adhere them to the wreath, placing the larger beads first, then filling in the areas between the larger beads with the smaller beads, and I continued to do this until I was happy with the way it looked. Next, I took some of this thin red ribbon and tied a small shoestring bow and used hot glue to attach it to the bottom of the wreath right under the green tree and then trimmed up the tails. Then, to finish this one up, I took some of this silver ribbon and tied it to the top of the wreath and then tied a knot in the top and cut off the excess ribbon to create a hanger, and this one is finished. I am thrilled with the way this ornament turned out. It is probably one of my top favorites from this video. For For this next set of ornaments, I used 3 of these small silver ornaments from this pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and started by removing the caps from all 3 ornaments. Next, I used folk art paint in the color lipstick red to paint one of the ornaments. I then used folk art paint in the color bright green to paint the second ornament, and finally I used folk art paint in the color cayman blue to paint the last ornament. Once the paint was completely dry, I used some washi tape and placed it around the center of the ornament, keeping it as straight as possible. Next, I took this gold metallic marker from the Dollar Tree and traced around the top of the washi tape and tried to keep the line a consistent thickness. I then traced around the bottom of the washi tape, again trying to be as consistent as possible to create 2 gold lines around the center of the ornament. After letting the gold paint dry, I carefully removed the washi tape. I then repeated this step to add 2 gold lines around the center of the other 2 ornaments. Next, I used 3 of these white bottle brush trees that I picked up at Walmart. Since I was only needing the trees, I went ahead and pulled off all of the bases. Once I had the bases removed, I applied some hot glue around the stem of the tree and placed it down inside the top of one of the ornaments and held it in place until the glue set up. I then repeated this step to add the other 2 trees to the other 2 ornaments. To decorate the trees, I used these beaded necklaces from the Dollar Tree. I cut a few of the beads off of the pink, red, green, and blue necklaces and then used some tweezers and hot glue to attach a few of them around the trees to look like little ornaments. Then to finish up these ornaments, I tied some loops of the silver ribbon and used hot glue to attach them to the top of each of the trees on the back side to create the hangers. I am super happy with the way this ornament set turned out. They were super simple to make and fairly inexpensive. For this next set of ornaments, I used 3 of these clear plastic ornaments that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I started by removing the cap and then took one of these small cardboard tree cones and placed it in the center of the ornament and used a Sharpie to trace around the bottom of the tree. Next, I took a hot knife and very carefully cut out the circle. Now, I used a hot knife because I happen to have one on hand, but you could also just use a sharp utility knife or even the tip of a hot glue gun. Once I had the center cut out, I took a white marker and went around the top of the ornament in a wavy line. I then used folk art paint in the color cayman blue to paint the bottom half of the ornament with a couple coats. Next, I used Anita's acrylic paint in the color white to paint the top half of the ornament with a few coats. After I had the ornament painted, I went back with some more white paint and, working in sections, added another layer of paint over the top of the ornament, and while it was still wet, took some ultra-fine white glitter from Hobby Lobby and sprinkled it over the top to add a little bit of shimmer and to make it look like the top of the ornament was covered in snow. Once everything was completely dry, I replaced the cap. Then, to decorate the inside of the ornament, I took some polyfill and pulled it apart to fluff it up, and then added some hot glue to the inside of the ornament at the bottom and placed the polyfill inside to act as the snow. Next, I used this small snowman ornament from this pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I cut the gold hanger off of the snowman and then added some hot glue to the bottom and placed it inside the ornament in the center, nestled in the snow. I then applied some hot glue around the opening of the front of the ornament and attached a silver chenille stem from the Dollar Tree to help hide the uneven edges and to give it a nice finished look. Then, to finish up this ornament, I took one of the silver wire ornament hooks from the Dollar Tree and placed it on the top of the ornament and twisted it together to create a hanger. I then repeated these steps to make 2 more of these diorama ornaments, painting one bright green and the other lipstick red. I think these turned out absolutely adorable, and to me these look super vintage and again super easy to make and very affordable. For this next set of ornaments, I repeated the same steps from the previous ornament set to create an opening in the front of the plastic ornaments, but this time I did a flower petal design around the openings and covered it with white glitter. I do want to mention I used the same bright green, cayman blue, and lipstick red paints to paint these ornaments as well. I did go ahead and glue some polyfill to the inside of these ornaments to mimic the snow. Then, to decorate the inside of these ornaments, I used the angel from this pack of ornaments from Hobby Lobby, one of these little deer ornaments from Hobby Lobby, and some of these gold and silver bottle brush trees from the Dollar Tree. Here's a look at how these ornaments turned out. I think these also scream vintage ornaments, and I did go ahead and finish these off with a silver chenille stem and a wire hook. For this next set of ornaments, I used this set of vintage images that I sized to the size that I wanted and printed them out onto some cardstock and carefully cut them out. Again, I will leave a link to this free printable in the description box below. Next, I used these 2 vintage Christmas scrapbook papers from this mini paper pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. Once I decided which images I wanted on which piece of paper, I used a regular school glue stick on the back of one of the printed images and placed it onto the back of one of the sheets of scrapbook paper. Here I am showing that I did not glue the center of the image at the very top to the scrapbook paper so that I could easily add a hanger later. After I had all the images attached to the scrapbook paper and gave them a little while for the glue to set up, I went ahead and cut them back out. Next, I took 2 of these red chenille stems from the Dollar Tree and cut them in half to make the hangers for these ornaments. I created a hoop with 1 piece of the chenille stem, then added some hot glue on the ends and placed it at the top of the ornament between the cardstock image and the scrapbook paper. Then pinched the 2 together to seal it in place, and this one is finished. I then repeated this step to add the hangers to the other 3 ornaments. This is another set of ornaments that I absolutely love. These images are hands down some of my favorite vintage Christmas images available. For this next set of ornaments, I used 8 of these giant craft sticks from Walmart. I started by cutting 12 pieces of the craft stick that was roughly 9.4 centimeters or 3.7 inches long, and then 4 pieces of craft stick that was roughly 8 centimeters or 3.15 inches long. To assemble the base of the ornament, I used one of the 9.4 centimeter sticks laying vertically and used hot glue to attach 3 of the 8 centimeter sticks on top, laying them horizontally and leaving a small gap between each of the sticks. This is how it should look once it's put together. I then repeated this step to create the other 3 ornament bases. Next, I applied a layer of Mod Podge over the front of each base and set it aside to dry for roughly 5 to 10 minutes. While I was waiting on the bases to dry, I printed out these 4 images that I created onto some regular printer paper and cut them out along the dotted lines. Again, I will have a link to the free printable in the description box below. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I placed one of the images on the front of one of the bases and then placed a piece of parchment paper on top and took my Cricut Easy Press Mini and went over the top of the image to reactivate the Mod Podge and adhere it to the base. Again, you don't have to do it this way. You can simply just Mod Podge or glue the image onto the base if you prefer to do it that way. After I had the image on the base, I took an X-Acto knife and cut along the edges between the craft sticks to remove the paper and open up the gaps. Next, I took a finger sander and sanded around the edges to remove any excess paper and to distress the areas between the craft sticks. I also decided to lightly go over the entire image to dull it down and make it look old and worn. Then, to finish up this ornament, I took half of a silver chenille stem and made a loop for a hanger and used hot glue to attach it to the back. I then repeated these steps to finish up the other 3 ornaments. Y'all, these turned out exactly how I had envisioned them. They are easily one of my top favorites out of today's video. What do y'all think? For this next ornament, I used 10 of these 10mm wooden beads from Amazon and used folk art paint in the color Cayman Blue to paint them. I also used 18 of these 8mm wooden beads from Amazon and used folk art paint in the color Lipstick Red to paint 9 of the beads and folk art paint in the color Bright Green to paint the other 9 beads. Next, I cut a piece of baling wire that I had in my stash to 9 inches long and used a pair of pliers to twist one end so that the beads would not fall off. I then placed the beads onto the wire in the pattern of blue, red, green, and blue and continued to repeat this pattern until I had all the beads on the wire. Once I had all the beads in place, I bent the wire into the shape of a circle and bent the other end in a hook shape and attached the 2 ends together. Then, to secure them in place, I took a pair of pliers and pinched each end to close them. I then worked with the beaded wire until I was happy with the shape of the circle. Next, I used the pink tree out of this package of mini bottle brush trees that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I carefully removed the base from the tree by twisting it off and then added some hot glue to the stem and placed it inside the bottom of the beaded wreath so that the stem was right over where the two ends of the wire were connected. I then made a small shoestring bow using some thin red ribbon and used hot glue to attach it to the wreath right under the tree to cover up where it was glued to the wreath. Then, to finish up this ornament, I took a piece of the silver ribbon and tied it to the top of the wreath using a slip knot, then tied the top ends together in a knot and cut off the excess, and this one is finished. I decided I wanted a set of these, so I went ahead and made two more, one with a blue tree and one with a green tree, coordinating the colors of the beads with the colors of the trees. I think these turned out really cute, and I can't wait to add them to my tree. For this next ornament, I used another one of these beaded wreath ornaments from the Dollar Tree and started by removing the hanger and the floral pick. Next, I used apple barrel paint in the color bright red and gave the entire ornament a couple of good coats. Once the paint was completely dry, I took some of this spray adhesive from the Dollar Tree and, working in sections, sprayed the wreath and took this ultrafine red glitter and sprinkled it on top. I continued this step until I had the entire front, sides, and back of the wreath covered with the glitter, making sure to let each side dry completely before continuing. After I had the wreath covered with the glitter, I took it outside and gave it a couple coats of this Mod Podge Gloss Clear acrylic sealer to help keep the glitter from falling off. While I was waiting on the wreath to dry, I cut a small belt buckle shape out of some cardstock and used folk art paint in the color gold ore to paint the front and back with about 3 coats. Once everything was completely dry, I used some of this black ribbon from the Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach it to the back side center of the right side of the wreath, and then cut it so that it was long enough to reach the other side and secured it in place with more hot glue. Next, I used hot glue to attach the buckle to the center of the ribbon to finish this Santa's belt. Then, to finish up this ornament, I took some of this thin red ribbon and tied it to the top of the wreath with a knot, and then tied the two ends together in a knot to create a hanger and cut off the excess ribbon. I just love how this Santa wreath turned out. It is super simple but adorable and did not take very long at all to make. For this next ornament, I used 5 of these tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. I started by using wood glue to attach 3 of the blocks together vertically, and then 1 of the blocks horizontally on the top and the bottom of the 3 blocks to create the base for this ornament. After I had the base put together, I set it aside and allowed it to dry for several hours. Once the glue had set up, I applied a layer of Mod Podge on the front of the base and set it aside to dry for 5 to 10 minutes. While I was waiting on the Mod Podge to dry, I printed out these vintage Christmas book covers that I sized to fit onto the base, onto some regular printer paper, and cut them out. Again, I'll leave a link to this printable in the description box below. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I centered one of the book images onto the front of the block and placed a piece of parchment paper on top and used my Cricut Easy Press Mini to reactivate the Mod Podge and adhere the image to the front of the base. Next, I took a finger sander and sanded off all of the paper that was hanging over the edges so that it had a nice clean finished look. I used one of these small gold eye hooks that I had in my stash and screwed it into the top of the ornament in the center. Then, to finish this one up, I took some of this thin red ribbon and attached it to the eye hook using a slip knot, then tied a knot in the top and cut off the excess ribbon to create the hanger, and this one is finished. I then repeated these steps to create 2 more vintage Christmas book ornaments to create a set. Y'all, these are some of my favorite ornaments. I love the simplicity of these, but the look of the book covers adds such a nostalgia to this vintage-inspired decor. For this next ornament, I cut a piece of baling wire at 10 inches long and started by bending it into a U shape. I then took a pair of pliers and made a hook shape on each end of the wire and hooked them together to close the circle. To secure the ends, I took some pliers and pinched the hooked ends together. Once I had the wire put together, I worked with the shape until I was happy with the way the circle looked. Next, I took 6 of these Canadian pine stems that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby and wrapped them around the entire wire wreath. I used 6 since I liked the fullness that 6 gave to the wreath, but you could use as many or as few as you wanted. I then took one of these small deer from this pack that I picked up at Hobby Lobby and used hot glue on the bottoms of its hooves to attach it to the inside of the wreath at the bottom. Next, I cut some of the red, green, pink, and blue beads from these beaded necklaces from the Dollar Tree, and using a pair of tweezers and some hot glue, I attached them around the front and sides of the wreath until I was happy with the way it looked. Next, I made this small shoestring bow out of the thin red ribbon and used hot glue to attach it to the top of the wreath in the center. Then to finish up this ornament, I used one of the silver ornament hooks from the Dollar Tree and placed it through the pine stems at the top of the wreath, and this one is finished. This is another one of my top favorites from this video, and I'll be making a few more of these for my tree before I start decorating it. For this next ornament, I used this piece of scrapbook paper from the scrapbook paper pack I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby. I started by using this metal ruler to measure out how wide I wanted each strip of paper to be, which happened to be the width of the ruler, and marked the paper so I would know where to cut. Next, I used a paper cutter to cut the scrapbook paper to size. I then repeated this step so that I had two pieces of scrapbook paper the same size. Once I had both pieces cut, I folded one strip of the paper in an accordion-style fold, trying to keep each fold the same size as the previous fold for consistency. I then repeated this step to fold the other strip of paper. After I had both strips of paper folded, I used some glue to attach the end of one strip to the end of the other strip, and then the other two ends together to create a circle and set it aside to let the glue dry. Once the glue was set up, I flattened the circle out onto the table and added a dab of hot glue to the center of the circle and held it in place until the glue cooled down. Next, I took one of the silver chenille stems and using a pair of tweezers, rolled the end of the stem several times to make it just big enough to cover up the center of the circle and cut it off. I then applied hot glue to the center of the paper circle and placed the chenille piece on top. Then I took one of these red beads from the beaded necklace from the Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach it to the center of the circle. To finish up this ornament, I took some of the silver ribbon and created a loop and used hot glue to attach it to the back of the ornament, and this one is finished. I love this one so much I went ahead and made 3 more using some more of the scrapbook paper from the Christmas pack. And you can actually get 2 of each of these ornaments from one piece of scrapbook paper. For this next ornament, I used one of these disc-shaped plastic ornaments from the Dollar Tree and started by removing the cap. I also printed out these 3 circle-shaped vintage images onto some regular printer paper sized to fit the ornament and cut them out. Again, these will be linked in the description box below. To adhere the image to the ornament, I applied a thin layer of Mod Podge directly onto the back of the ornament and placed the image face down and smoothed it out the best that I could to remove all of the wrinkles and set it aside for a couple of hours to let it fully dry. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I went back and applied another layer of Mod Podge on the back of the ornament and over the back of the image, making sure to go all the way to the seam where the 2 pieces are put together. And while the Mod Podge was still wet, I took some ultra-fine white glitter from Hobby Lobby and sprinkled it over the back of the ornament to cover up the wrinkles and to give it a nice finished look, then set it aside to dry for a couple of hours. After the ornament was completely dry, I used some of this Mod Podge Gloss Spray Clear Acrylic Sealer to seal the back of the ornament so that the glitter would not come off as easy. Next, I used some of this faux snow from the Dollar Tree, and once the ornament was dry, I used a funnel to put just enough snow in the bottom to cover the bottom section of the image. Then, to finish up this ornament, I simply replaced the cap. I did go ahead and leave the silver hanger on the top that it came with, and that's it for this one. I repeated these steps to create the other 2 ornaments using the printed images, using a red glitter on the back of the one with Santa and blue glitter on the back of the deer. I wish I could have filmed these without the glare because they did actually turn out really cute and they're very retro and vintage inspired. For this next ornament, I used one of these mini round bowls from the Dollar Tree and started by using folk art paint in the color lipstick red and gave the inside and outside of the bowl 3 good coats. Once the paint was dry, I took a white marker and went around the top of the bowl in a wavy line to mimic snow, and then used Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White and ultrafine white glitter to fill in the top section of the bowl. Next, I cut a piece of foam board that would fit down right inside the top of the bowl and used hot glue around the edges to secure it in place. To create the hanger for this ornament, I used a silver chenille stem and used hot glue on the ends and tucked them down inside the bowl between the foam and the inside edge. I did try to keep these as even as possible so that the ornament would hang straight and be balanced. Next, I took 2 of the small bottle brush trees from the Dollar Tree and hot glued them to the foam board closer to the back side of the ornament. I then took one of the mini deer ornaments and used hot glue to attach it to the foam board out in front of the trees. Once I had the trees and deer in place, I took some of the silver tinsel from the Dollar Tree and used hot glue to attach it to the foam board and fill in all the empty spaces so that no foam board was visible. Then, to finish up this ornament, I used one of these holly leaves from this pack that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby and used hot glue to attach it to the foam board to the left side of the deer, and this one is finished. Y'all, this one turned out so cute. I'm usually not one for tinsel anything, but for some reason this one reminds me of my grandmother's Christmas tree when I was growing up, so to me that's a successful vintage-inspired ornament. For this next ornament, I used only the flute part of one of these wine glasses from the Dollar Tree and started by using a sharp utility knife to cut off the very tip of the stem. This was fairly easy to do. If you just take your time, it'll eventually pop right off. Next, I used apple barrel paint in the color Key West and gave the inside and outside of the flute 3 good coats. Once the paint was dry, I used folk art brushed metal paint in the color brushed silver and a foam brush and pounced the paint onto the glass around the top, bottom, and sides and very lightly around the opening until I was happy with the way it looked. After the paint was dry, I used some of this spray adhesive and sprayed it around the top of the glass where I'd put the silver paint, then sprinkled it with some of this chunky silver glitter and continued to repeat this step until I was happy with the way it looked and set it aside to dry. Next, I took one of these 20mm wooden beads from Amazon and used folk art brushed metal paint in the color brushed silver and gave the wood bead a couple good coats. Once the paint was dry, I placed the bead on the end of a silver chenille stem, then twisted the end to secure the bead in place and added a dab of hot glue for a little extra security. After the paint on the glass was dry, I fed the chenille stem through the top of the glass, and then when I was happy with the placement of the wooden bead, I secured it in place with a knot and a dab of hot glue. Then, to finish up this bell ornament, I created a hanger with the excess chenille stem, securing the end in place with some hot glue down inside the top of the bell. I am honestly surprised at how this turned out. I felt more than a couple of times while making this that it was not going to look like a bell, but this is another one of those ornaments that makes me think of something that my grandmother would have had on her tree, and I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. For this next ornament, I used one of these 2.4-inch styrofoam balls from this 3-pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I started by placing a skewer in the bottom of the styrofoam ball and then used some of this Decor Snow Tech that I picked up at Hobby Lobby and stippled it onto the styrofoam ball with a coarse paintbrush, making sure to cover up all of the styrofoam. Once I was happy with the way the snowball looked, I took some ultra-fine white glitter and sprinkled it all over the ball while the Snow Tech was still wet so that it looked a little more like it was made out of snow, and set it aside to dry for several hours. Next, I took 2 of these round tacks from the Dollar Tree and gave them a couple coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. After the snowball was completely dry, I placed the 2 tacks in the styrofoam to create the eyes of the snowman. I do want to mention I decided to make where the skewer was the top of the head so that it would be easier to place the hanger. Next, I took this carrot nose that I picked up on sale at Hobby Lobby and used hot glue to attach it to the snowman. Once I had the face in place, I removed the skewer stick and replaced it with one of these silver eye hooks using a dab of hot glue to secure it in place. I decided the snowman needed a little something extra, so I took some pink blush that I had on hand and using the brush that comes with it, applied a little bit on each of the cheeks. To create a hanger, I took a piece of this silver ribbon and tied it to the top of the eye hook in a knot, and then tied a knot in the ends at the top and cut off the excess. Okay, so the mouth was an afterthought, but it just did not look right without one, so I took a black Sharpie and pressed it into the face to create little black dots for the mouth. I wanted the dots to be a little darker, so I took a small paintbrush and Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and filled in the dots, and this one is finished. I'm pretty happy with the way the snowman ornament turned out. I love the look and the texture the snow tech gives to it, but I think the nose is a little bit too long. What do y'all think? Let me know in the comments below. For this next set of ornaments, I used these vintage Christmas song sheet music images that I made and printed out onto some regular printer paper and cut out. Again, these will be linked in the description box below. I did go ahead and cut the coordinating blank pages in half while cutting out the images. To put these pieces together, I used some of this Beacon Clear adhesive and placed a line of glue along the front at the top of one of the half pieces and placed it at the bottom of the sheet music facing down so that the back of the half piece was facing upwards. I then repeated this step to attach the other half piece to the top of the music sheet. It should look like this once the top and bottom pieces are in place. After the glue had set up, I took the piece over to the kitchen sink and used a lighter to lightly burn the sides to give it an old and worn look. Next, I used one of these half-inch wooden dowels from the Dollar Tree and measured it along the top of the music sheet to see how long it needed to be, then marked it with a pencil. I then repeated this step to measure and mark the bottom piece of the music sheet. I then cut the pieces of the dowel to size. I also used 4 of these 8mm wooden beads from Amazon and used folk art brushed metal paint in the color brushed gold to give them 2 good coats. Once the paint was dry, I used hot glue to attach one of the wooden beads to one end of the dowel and repeated this step to add a wooden bead to each end of the 2 dowels. Next, I applied a line of hot glue along the dowel rod and placed the end of the bottom of the music sheet on the dowel and rolled it up to look like a scroll and secured it in place with another line of hot glue at the bottom of the music sheet. I then repeated this step to add the second dowel rod to the top of the music. Then, to finish up this ornament, I used a piece of this thin red ribbon and fed it through the paper roll on the top of the music sheet, then tied it in a knot at the top and cut off the excess ribbon, and that's it for this one. I then repeated these steps to make the other 2 music scrolls. Y'all, these are my absolute favorite ornaments out of today's video, and the song possibilities for these music ornaments are endless. I chose ones from the early 50s, but you could choose any Christmas songs that you would like. This next project really isn't an ornament, it's actually a vintage style tree topper, and I used one of these 7-inch wooden circles from Walmart. I started by using Anita's acrylic paint in the color white to paint the entire circle with 2 good coats. While the paint was drying, I sketched out this vintage snowman face using an image that I found on Google as a reference and colored in the backside with a pencil to create a transfer. After the paint was completely dry, I taped the transfer onto the center of the circle, then used a pen to trace the face and transfer it onto the circle. Once I had the face transferred, I took a black Sharpie and filled in all of the facial features. Next, I took 2 of these half wooden beads from Amazon and used folk art paint in the color seashell pink to give them 2 good coats. I then took one of these round tacks from the Dollar Tree and used Waverly chalk paint in the color ink and gave it 2 good coats. Once the paint on the tack was completely dry, I took a pair of wire cutters and cut off the end of the tack. To assemble the 3D elements of the face, I used hot glue to attach one of the half wood beads to each side of the face where I had marked with little dots on the transfer for the cheeks, and then used hot glue to attach the tack to the center of the face as the nose. Then, to finish up the face, I used hot glue to attach some of the silver chenille stems around the outside edge of the circle. To make the snowman hat, I used 2 of these plastic shower curtain rings from this pack that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and some of this thick black felt that I had in my stash. I measured out a strip of felt that was 3 inches wide and cut it to size. I then made sure the end of the shower curtain ring was closed and then used hot glue to attach it to the bottom of the felt, and adding more glue around the outside of the ring, rolled the felt over the top. Next, I took the second ring and used hot glue to attach it to the top of the felt, then added more glue on the top of the ring and rolled the felt on top. After I had both rings in place, I continued to add glue on top of the rings and rolled the felt until I had the rings completely covered, then added hot glue along the seam to secure it in place. Once I had the body of the hat made, I placed it down on top of some more black felt and traced around it and cut it out to get the top of the hat. I then used hot glue to attach it to the top of the hat, Then used a pair of small scissors to cut off any excess felt that was hanging over the edge. To make the brim of the hat, I used one of these wooden coasters and traced it out onto some more of the black felt and cut it out. I then used hot glue to attach the body of the hat in the center of the brim, and the hat's finished. To attach the hat to the snowman, I placed a generous amount of hot glue on the top of the snowman's head and held the hat in place until the glue set up. Next, I used one of these tree toppers from the Dollar Tree and removed the star from the stand by simply pulling it off. I then used some of this 1.5 inch red ribbon and some of this 1.5 inch white ribbon, both from Walmart, and cut a piece of each ribbon that was roughly 19 inches long. Okay, I have to apologize here because my camera turned off and I did not get the footage, but to attach the snowman to the tree topper, I used 2 tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree and hot glued them to the back of the snowman, and then used an extraordinary amount of hot glue to attach the tree topper to the bottom of the tumbling tower block. Then, to finish up this tree topper, I took the 2 ribbons and wrapped them around the base of the snowman to hide the tumbling tower blocks and tied it in a loose knot, and this one is finished. Y'all, I'm kind of obsessed with this little guy. I think he is just the cutest and can't wait to add him to the top of my vintage tree this year. But y'all have to let me know what you think in the comments below. And that's it for today's video. I know it was a super long one and I do apologize, but I really wanted to get all of these out into one video. I want to thank you so much for sticking with me today while I created these beautiful vintage-inspired Christmas ornaments. I hope you enjoyed these DIYs and found some inspiration for your holiday decor. If you love these ideas, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below sharing your favorite ornament from today's video. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button and stick around for a little while for more budget-friendly and creative home decor ideas. Happy crafting, and I'll see y'all next time.